Hi folks, welcome to the first instructional playthrough for Rifle Squad, the US at Omaha Beach. Slightly different for this one in that I'm going to break the instructional videos down into more than one session. I did try to film an instructional playthrough yesterday, and after an hour and 45 minutes I decided the video was simply too long. And also my camera ran out of memory, so aborted that one. So I'm going to start again. In this video I shall do the setup, sort of basic overview, and possibly a turn or two depending how we go on, and try and keep the videos to a reasonable length. I do plan to play through the whole game, but as I say, that will be over a series of videos rather than in one block. So as I say, this is Rifle Squad US at Omaha Beach. I'm hoping it might be the first in a series of Rifle Squad games, covering different sort of nationalities, perhaps different eras, maybe even. We'll see how that goes. It looks a little like Fields of Normandy in its appearance, certainly the map size and scale and so on, but it's a different game system altogether. In fact, it's quite, for me, quite a sort of complex system in some ways, and the rules do run to about 40 pages as a result, although there are lots of diagrams in there and they're nice and clear as ever. But because there's so much in it, that's why it will take a little while to sort of work through and explain how things go. It's probably best that you've read the rules through once at least before watching these videos, because I won't be covering every single little detail, but you know, I'll leave that up to you to decide how you sort of play that. So this is the map that we have in front of us. We're controlling as you would expect, a US rifle squad. So we have 12 guys down here, and they are of differing abilities and different weapon sort of loadouts, if you like. You have 4 leaders in your squad. So you have a Staff Sergeant here, Staff Sergeant Ray. Then you have a Sergeant, so Sergeant Jack is there. And 2 corporals, the yellow ones here, so Corporal Sykes and Corporal Watts. Ray has a rifle and grenades, Sykes has rifle and grenades, Jack has rifle and a grenade launcher. Corporal Watts here just has a rifle, but he is part of the bar team, so he could have the Browning automatic rifle, quite a powerful kind of rifle, but he, for me, hasn't got that here. So part of the setup is to allocate the bar to one of your bar team. I've allocated it to Private Dakin here, so you can see on his counter it says bar 4, and his rifle is greyed out. Private Howe has a rifle and his bar is greyed out, and Corporal Watts has a rifle and his bar is greyed out. Okay, so you use different counters depending on how you allocate the bar. If I'd given the bar to Corporal Watts, then I would be using this counter here, which has the bar 4 on it, and Dakin would be using his normal rifle counter. Okay, the bar team doesn't have to stick together. Can function separately. Only one guy actually carries and operates the bar. As I say here, Private Dakin, but I'm going to keep them together for now, see how that works out. I've then spread my guys across the bottom here. You place them generally in these bottom 5 hexes. So what else have we got here? We've got a couple of sort of standard rifle guys here. So Private Brigg and Private Jones have just rifle and hand grenades. Private Lopez here has a grenade launcher as well, much like Sergeant Jack, as well as a rifle, obviously. We've got 2 scouts, so Private Hall and Private Lee. These little purple S's on them are scouts. We'll see how they operate as we go through. And Private Gill here is the medic, hence the red cross on his counter. But those 3 still have a rifle, obviously, and grenades as well to use. So still there for action as well as their other functions. So a good variety across the board of different things going on there. The setup for this game, very simple as always in my games. So the instructions told me to place the objective on this hex here and to randomly place these three, so 2 heavy machine guns and a light machine gun on these 3 bunker positions. So I rolled for that, placed the LMG here and the 2 HMGs there. It also said to put them into additional cover, so I've put a cover marker on them, and again we'll see how that works as we go through. The maps themselves have terrain, as you can see, so we've got water, sea hexes here. It's obviously shallow sea, these guys just jumped out of the boats or whatever. We've got beach hexes, very clearly marked there. We've got clear hexes, and beach hexes are basically clear hexes as well, just different graphical style. With nothing on really, and maybe the odd minor graphic here and there, but nothing significant. Trees hexes, which generally have 3 trees printed on them for clarity, which give a small amount of cover. We have woods hexes, which give a bit more cover, and also buildings hexes, which there aren't any on this map, but later we'll see there are buildings hexes on other maps, which give a similar amount of cover as woods hexes. Then we've got bunker hexes, so 3 bunkers here. Let me just uncover that for a second to let you see what that looks like. It's a bunker, and they give the most cover, as you would expect. There are also higher ground hexes on this map. There are 3. They're always sort of these brown encircled hexes for clarity. They've got a slight sort of rocky or craggy graphic to them as well to make them stand out, and they are higher ground hexes. Line of sight in this game runs only along straight lines of hexes, so a bit like some of my other games, like Lone Sherman, for example, does the same. Both Lone Sherman games, in fact, as does Lone Astro Tank, and probably 1 or 2 others as well. Assault on Vimy Ridge, for example, that's a square grid, has the same kind of concept of line of sight running along straight lines. It's a concept I picked up from playing Fields of Fire several years ago, and found it to be quite a neat way of doing line of sight. Keeps it very simple. So line of sight runs only along straight lines of hexes. So for example, whenever Lee is here, his line of sight runs along these straight lines of hexes only, going backwards as well in all 6 directions. But so for example, he couldn't see this hex here because that's not in line of sight. Okay. That's to reflect the fact that yes, whilst these guys can in theory see 360 degrees around them simply by turning their heads and bodies, obviously. In fact, in the midst of warfare, that's not possible. Somebody cannot physically be looking in 360 degrees at all times. So to give some sort of vagaries of war and so on, that's a design decision I've made, and I think it works pretty well here. If you try and play this game with a different sort of line of sight rule, you will struggle hugely. So for example, if you use traditional lines of sight, this HMG could effectively attack all of these guys along this whole beach, as could this LMG. For this HMG, you'd be having to get out your bit of string and see whether it, the woods or whatever blocked it. But with my rules of line of sight, this HMG, for example, is firing down here and down here, and this LMG is firing down here and down this run of beach here. Okay, but it can't see, this LMG cannot see any of these guys over here because they're not on a straight line of hexes. All nice and clearly explained in the rules with diagrams and so on. But once you get that, it works nice and easily. You don't need string or lasers or anything like that. It's very clear when something is in, blocking line of sight or not. The only things in this game that do block line of sight are the hill hexes themselves, and that's obviously through them. So, you've got one guy here, they won't be able to see each other because of the hill. Same with woods. Although if you're on a hill, you can see over the woods. And also enemy soldiers block line of sight. And so not because they're physically blocking line of sight, but they are, again, as the rules explain, it's a design concept, because if you are looking down a line of sight and there are 2 enemies, naturally your fire would train onto the nearest enemy. So effectively that's blocking line of sight to the guy behind. You must always shoot at the guy that's first along your line of sight. So that is the map. That's generally how it works. There's a turn counter here. We'll see what these little red numbers mean as we go through, but generally you get 12 turns to complete the objective. The objective is to resolve all of these potential enemy markers, as they're called here. They're placed on question mark positions. There are 8 on every map. You have to resolve them all. You don't have to kill all the enemy forces or eliminate all the enemy forces, but you have to have resolved all of these 8 markers. In other words, moved your guys onto them and established what is appearing in relation to each of them. You then have to secure the objective to win the mission. You can play this game as a campaign, which means you are stringing 3 missions together. So a landing mission, which we're doing here, and then a sort of pushing inland mission, if you like, and then a final mission where you take a final objective. But you can also play them as single missions. I'm choosing to play the first mission here to show you how things work. Okay, I think that's probably enough as a sort of general overview. Let's start up and play the first turn, and then we can see generally how it works, and I can explain lots of the rules as we go through. The first turn will take a while as I explain how all the various concepts work. As ever with my games, most of those rules are over here. I appreciate you probably can't see this fantastically well, particularly where as it bends around the corner here, but I just find that popping a couple of boxes under there or something, or a thick book, just helps to keep this page flatter, and that's generally pretty flat, and it's not going to bother me in relation to, there's a slight bounce on it, but it's not going to, these counters grip pretty well to the paper, so that's not going to affect anything. So we start then, the game runs in, each turn runs in 2 phases. So the first phase is the US operations phase, and the second phase is the German operations phase. The vast majority of the game, your time will be spent on the US operations phase. The German operations phase doesn't take that long at all, which is a good thing I think about this game, is that you don't spend a lot of time operating the German forces. So let's just move my light, it's slightly blocking my dice tower. Right, so let's start with the first phase then and see how that goes, first turn. So we're going to start, as I say, with the US operations phase. So the whole phase is really based around the 4 leaders that you have on the board here. So the Staff Sergeant, who is the most senior leader, and then the Sergeant Jack, who is a second in command, if you like, and then the 2 corporals, who are of equal seniority, but third in command, if you like. Then you've got the 8 privates who you can command. The US operations phase is split into 4 impulses, and each impulse is one leader doing what they do, is performing the orders or making the orders of one of each of those leaders. So what you do is you choose each leader in turn in any order and perform their impulse before moving on to the next leader, and so on. So once you've done all 4 of the leaders, then the phase is over. Okay, so let's start by thinking what we're going to do. Now, I've set up like this. The bar is potentially the most useful weapon on the board, although there are attacks which can be more powerful in some ways, such as assaulting and calling in Mortifier and so on. But I'm going to start over here. One of my key objectives for this particular turn is to try and neutralize some of this heavy, or this machine gun fire. HMGs have a range of 5 and LMGs have a range of 4 hexes. So this LMG can fire down, 1, 2, 3, 4. It can fire down its full length, and so can this HMG, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down to here, and so can this one obviously as well. So they're all, the ranges are not really relevant at the moment. They can fire right to the end of the strip, which most of the time they'll be able to do. Now, if this LMG was up here, its 4 range would only reach down to the beach here, but unfortunately for us, it's there and not there. So I want to try and neutralise some of this fire, because otherwise we're going to come under some pretty heavy fire. The red numbers on the counters indicate basically the power of the weapons, and it's the number of dice you roll when attacking with them, with a few amendments here and there. So you can see that the LMG rolls 5, the HMG rolls 6 dice. They're quite powerful compared to my bar, which rolls 4, and all my other rifles, which roll 1 each. Grenades and grenade launchers have a question mark because the number of dice vary, and again we'll see how that works as we move through. So it's quite important that I try and neutralise in some way this HMG here. And that means I want to either eliminate it or at least pin it, which reduces the chances of it firing this in its phase. So I'm going to start over here with Corporal Watts. Okay, so as I say, this is the first impulse. I'm going to do Corporal Watts first. And the first thing to do then is to establish how many orders Corporal Watts gets for his impulse. And for a corporal, and I'm going to explain the rules, but they're all noted over here. Once you know them, you know, there's plenty of little reminders and things over here of all the detail about, you know, what I'm saying. Corporal Watts, being fit and healthy and not pinned, gets the orders equal to 1d6. Okay, so for Corporal Watts, we roll a d6, and fortunately, I've rolled a 6, which means that Corporal Watts has 6 orders to dish out in his impulse. Now you can give orders to, I should say, any soldier which is either on the same hex or on an adjacent hex. Okay, so Corporal Watts could potentially order Private Dakin, Private Howe and Sergeant Jack. However, you can only give orders to soldiers who are of lower rank than yourself. So Corporal Watts cannot give orders to Sergeant Jack. He can only give orders to Dakin, Howe and himself. He also, just for clarity, cannot give orders to Corporal Sykes because they are of the same rank. Okay. So what can he do with these 6 orders? Well, there are lots of things he can do. Lots of things. And you don't have to roll for actions or anything. You can simply choose from a suite of actions what sort of things you want your troops to do. And each action comes with an order cost. So once you've rolled the order down, once you've established how many orders a leader gets, it's best to leave a d6 next to them just to remind you how many orders they have, and turn that dice as you use up those orders to count down. They'll never have more than 6 orders. It's the most that any leader can get. So Corporal Watts really wants to get some fire onto this HMG. So what he can do is he can order Dakin to fire the bar. Okay, this is a rifle squad. Rifle squad tactics generally are to pin your enemies and then advance and hopefully kill them at close range, either assaulting or, you know, using grenades or close range fire or whatever. So that's what I'm going to do, because, you know, that's what you do. So bar, firing the bar, the Browning automatic rifle, actually takes 2 orders. Okay, it tells you over here in this chart here that firing the bar fire, firing the bar, takes 2 orders. So that would reduce the remaining orders to 4. Okay, and that allows me to roll 4 attack dice. So let's put those there. Okay. The range of the bar, it says over here, is 0 to 4 hexes. So 1, 2, 3, no problem. It can fire at this HMG. It can't fire at this LMG. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not only because it's out of range, but it's also not in line of sight because it's not on a straight line of hexes from the bar, whereas this guy is. So bar fire onto the bunker hex, we're going to have 4 dice. Okay. However, what I'm also going to do with Corporal Watts is order Private Howe to fire his rifle. Okay, and rifle fire gives 1 dice. I'm then going to order effectively himself. So Corporal Watts orders himself to fire his rifle. So that takes another order. And that is another dice. What I'm doing here is something called combined fire. And you can only do this when soldiers are on the same hex. Okay, so if, you know, Private Lee was here, we couldn't order him to fire at the same time. We must also all be firing at the same target. And the target is the hex, by the way, not the soldier. You can only target a hex that has an enemy soldier on it. But if there's more than one enemy on there, we would be automatically targeting all of those soldiers as we go. So I've used up 4 orders, 2 to fire the bar and 1 to fire each of these rifles, but it's given me 6 dice. The advantage of using combined fire is that you then get a bonus die for each additional soldier that's firing. So we have 3 here, so that's 2 additional soldiers. So we get 2 more dice, 2 bonus dice. So in fact, we're going to roll 8 attack dice. And 8 is the most attack dice you can ever roll in one sort of fire event, if you like. And that's when this bar team fires together. Now, this is the bar team, but it doesn't have to be the bar team. Dakin could have fired with Private Lee and Private Brig, instructed by Sergeant Ray, who might have been on the next, or Sergeant Jack on the next hex, or whatever. The Bard can fire with anybody else. The reason I've kind of clumped them together for the video is that if Dakin gets injured, he will drop the bar, and there's a counter to demark or denote where he drops the bar. Okay, and then only other bar operators can pick it up. So then Howe or Corporal Watts could pick up the bar, and then you would swap the counters out accordingly, and they would use their bar 4 counters, and Dakin would go to a rifle 1 counter, and hopefully get healed by the medic at some point. So there's lots of little things going on, but there's a reason to sort of keep these certainly in proximity. You don't have to all stay on the same hex rigidly at all times, and sometimes it's best to have Corporal Watts moving away. In some scenario, some people might want to give the bar to Corporal Watts so that he can easily order himself to fire it whenever he wants, but that can bring its own risks, because you often end up putting him in the line of fire more than you might want to. You don't really want your leaders to get injured, because then the number of orders they get reduces, as it does if they're pinned, and that can impact obviously on your ability to get your forces up the beach quickly. Okay, so we've used 4 orders of the 6, so just leave that there to show we've still got 2 more. We're going to roll 8 dice to attack, and we're aiming at this hex here, which happens to have just 1 German soldier in it who's operating this HMG. Now, when we roll these attack dice, we're looking only for 5s and 6s. 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s are misses and can be ignored. There's only one exception to that, and that's when the attacker is on a higher ground hex. So if the attacker is on a high ground hex, then they would re-roll any 1s that they rolled at this point. Okay, so you get a sort of an advantage by re-rolling any misses which are showing a 1. Okay, but I'm not on higher ground, so I'm going to fire these 8 dice, or roll these 8 dice. Let's see what happens. Okay, and that's come out sort of average to good, I suppose, from 8 dice is what you would generally expect. I've got a feeling one might have just flipped them, but I certainly rolled 2 6s and a 5. I saw those. I'm not sure I got that. It's actually not right. I'll show you why in a minute, but it doesn't really matter. So these 4 dice are misses. As I say, if I was on a higher ground, I would now get a chance to re-roll those 2 1s, but I'm not, so I don't. So they're misses. But what I have got here is a couple of hits and a couple of pins. Okay, so 6s are, I say hits, they're actually called accurate shots. Okay, so these 6s are accurate shots. These 5s are pins. All right, now, a soldier can only be pinned once. Once they're pinned, and any further pins for that soldier are irrelevant. Okay? If there were 2 soldiers in there, then 2 pins can be relevant, because you need 1 pin for each of them. But there's actually only 1 in there, so I actually only need 1 pin, so I'll just get rid of that as well. Now, you deal with the accurate shots first. Okay, so you deal with those first. What they mean is that of all the sort of fire we've fired at this HMG guy, 2 somethings are heading sort of straight between the eyes, if you like. So a couple of bullets in this case, I guess. If you chucked a grenade, it might be a couple of bits of shrapnel or whatever. But there are 2 accurate shots heading straight for the guy who's operating the HMG. However, he gets a chance to save these 2 hits. Okay, and he needs to save them both, because 1 hit will kill a German soldier. All right, US soldiers are injured and then killed. German soldiers are killed on the first hit. Okay? There are 2 accurate shots heading towards him, so he needs to save them both to survive. Fortunately for him, well, let me say this first of all. The basic save in a hex is 6+. Okay, so to save a hit, you would need to roll a 6. That is then reduced by the cover that is in the terrain naturally. And that's set out on this page here. So trees reduce it by 1. So the cover in trees would be 5+. Woods reduce it by 2, as do buildings. We haven't got any here. Means that the save in there would be 4+. Okay, now these are really important differences. If you're out in the open, your save is 6+. That means you're only going to save 1 in 6 shots, or accurate shots. If you're in trees, suddenly you're at 5+. You're saving 1 in 3 accurate shots. If you're in the woods, suddenly you're saving every other accurate shot, so 50%, because you need 4+ to save. If you're in a bunker, you get a -3 bonus, so the 6 basic save is reduced to 3+. So you're saving 2/3 of shots that come your way. You can see already he's got a decent chance of saving both of those. Even more than that, because he's found this additional cover, effectively what that means, I guess, in this thematically, is that he's, you know, hidden in a really strong point of the bunker, you know, all you can see are the whites of his eyes through a little window or something at the end of his HMG. He's found this additional cover. That reduces it by a further -1. So he has the best save you can ever have in this game, which is 2+. 2+. Amazing. Yeah, he only fails saves on a roll of 1. So that's going to be difficult. That's why, you know, these guys holed up in these bunkers are difficult. We need to get as many shots on them as possible. So he needs 2+ to save. There are two shots heading towards him. So as long as he doesn't roll a 1, then he's safe. Well, we obviously want him to roll a 1. He rolls a 5 and a 6, so he saves them both. Kind of half expected that, I guess. So he saves both shots, so he's fine. The hits, although they were on target, have deflected off the bunker or whatever it might be. However, we did roll a pin. Now, pins cannot be saved. Okay, this just means, you know, we've fired loads of shots in and around him and he's ducked his head down and thrown himself to the ground or whatever. You know what pinned means, you know, it's pinned or suppressed, if you like, one or the other, you know. I've called it pinned in this game, but it really means both things. Because pinned people don't move, and they don't fire whilst they're pinned, although they can rally and then fire. So simply by rolling a 5 means we have pinned this guy. So practically what that means is, as I say, he is unlikely, it's not impossible, but he's very unlikely to fire back in the German operations phase, unless we're unlucky. We'll see how that works in a minute. Corporal Watt still has 2 orders. I say there are lots of other things you can do, and we may decide here just to move up slightly. Just to give that a quick moment's thought. Probably, will I do that? Maybe I won't. So I'm just concerned, obviously, if I move R 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm in line of sight of this LMG. I've not suppressed that, you know, pinned that or destroyed it yet. Might do. But do I want to do that? Yeah, I think I will actually. I'm going to push Dakin and Howe up. So that to move is 1 order. So I've used 1 order to order Howe to move, and I've used 1 order to order Dakin to move up. Okay. Now, one important rule is that within an impulse, remember that's one leader's little bit of action, each soldier can only perform or try to perform each action once. So I couldn't order the bar to fire again or order Howe to fire again. And I can only, you know, I've ordered Howe to move up and Dakin to move up. I couldn't then order them to move again. You can't order Howe to move up, then move again. You can only do each thing once in each impulse. The leader can order it more than once. So Watts, for example, here has ordered, you know, 3 people to fire and then 2 people to move. That's fine, but they're all different people. So they're all, you know, Dakin has fired and moved, Howe has fired and moved, and Watts has fired. So no one's done more than 1 of the same action. That's the end of that impulse. So now I choose another leader. What I tend to do, I want to do for the cameras, I'll probably forget, is just twist Watts a little bit to show I've done him. It's got Jack, Sykes and Ray, and we move to a new impulse. That kind of resets everything. So these 2 can now fire again or move again or whatever. And that saves you having to remember who's done what across the whole range of impulses. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is do Jack. Now, the reason I've got Sergeant Jack sat here on his own is because I'm hoping that he'll be able to call some Mortifier in on this HMG up here. That can be a real nuisance because it's sort of splitting the map. Now he's shooting down here potentially. I don't really want to leave anybody in this column because it almost certainly will fire at them, and therefore it kind of splits his map. It means that these three guys are a bit cut off over here unless I push Jack in with them, but then these guys there's a lot of guys over here for just Sykes and Ray to maneuver about, so it just becomes a bit of a nuisance. Plus we've got to resolve these, and they're in the line of fire, and there's lots of reasons. You'll get used to all this stuff as you play the game, work out the sort of tactics and the problems involved. But I'd like to try and get some Mortifier on him. Unfortunately, Mortifier, and it doesn't say that on my chart here because I've changed this, so it does actually, since I got my proof copy. So don't worry, the copy you get will be right, obviously. Mortifier actually costs 5 orders, and therefore I need a fairly big roll. Now Sergeant Jack, being second in command, he rolls 2d6 to establish his orders for his impulse, and you take the higher of the two. So let's roll 2d6 for Jack. Wow, okay, that's a double 6. I was feeling good about my rolling today, I have to say. That's a double 6. Okay, so we take the highest, so that's going to be 6. So Jack also gets 6 orders. All right, which is great. Bit of a luxury really to get 6 for Watts and 6 for Jack, but there we go. So what I am going to actually do that Mortifier. So Mortifier has a range of 2 to 5 hexes. Okay, so you can't mortar your own hex, and you can't mortar an adjacent hex. You can only mortar one that's 2, 3, 4 or 5 hexes away. Now this HMG is 5 away. Again, you need line of sight, which I've got. Straight down this row of hexes, and none of these trees don't block line of sight, only woods do. So I've got a clear view of the HMG. Intervening hexes, as long as they don't block line of sight, you ignore them. They don't add or detract anything from the fire. Okay, just a few trees dotted around here and there. So I'm going to use 5 orders. Here's a lot, but I'm going to use them because I really want to try and do something about that HMG at the top. And for a mortar attack, you get 7 dice. Okay, so it's pretty good. There's something else about mortar attacks as well, which is they ignore you can ignore, if you like, any intervening German forces. So usually, as I said earlier, they block line of sight. So usually if I was there and Jack wanted to fire something, he would only be able to shoot at this guy, because he can't see the HMG beyond, because he's distracted, if you like, by this, so his fire will always go to this guy. But with Mortifier, I could actually fire that effectively, because the fire is, although Jack is seeing it, he's calling it in, the fire is actually coming from somewhere else. Oops, don't take the wrong counter off mic. Okay, so, but again, that's nice and clearly explained in the rules. So I've got 7 dice for Jack, and he's going to fire at that HMG. So let's do that first of all. And it's a decision to make, whether you use those 5 orders for that, or whether there's a lot of orders. There's a lot of move orders, for example, that could get your guys up the beach in a, you probably won't use Mortifier that often for that reason. Okay, it works the same way other than that. So we ignore 1s, 2s and 3s. Yeah, although that would generally be, so we ignore those because they're misses. And then we get 4, 5s and 6s here. And sorry, the 4 is a miss as well. What am I talking about? So we've got 2 pins and a hit. Yeah, two pins and or an accurate shot. Now the HMG still get a chance to save that, and unfortunately it's in a bunker and in cover again. So 2+ save. It gets a 4, so it has saved. But we did get a pin. We got 2 pins. Only one of those will be relevant, so we can pin the HMG with a Mortifier. Jack's then got another order left, so he could do several things with them. He could move, I guess, himself. He doesn't, we'll see why in a minute, but he doesn't really want to move into there. He could have Private Lee move up. He could even order Corporal Watts to move up, which is an option, I guess. I think what he'll actually do, though, is he's going to order Dakin and Howe to find a bit of cover. Now, the find cover order, it takes has 1 order cost, so you can do it. But there is a test to be done, and whether you successfully, this is trying to get one of these cover markers, whether you get that cover marker or not depends on a roll of the dice, and that depends, what you need depends on the terrain you are in. Okay, it's easier, clearly easier to find cover in a bunker hex or a woods hex than it is to find cover on a clear hex or, for example, a trees hex. So we have a chart over here, as you'd expect, and in a clear hex, which is what Dakin and Howe are in, you need 5+ to successfully find cover there. Okay, so we'll do that, and they get a 5, which means they do find cover, so I can put a cover marker in that hex. Now, Sergeant Jack there was ordering one of them. Didn't really matter because he was only doing it once, but if he had 2 orders left, he could have ordered Howe to find cover, and if he failed, he could have ordered Dakin to find cover with his final order. And once you find cover, it applies to the hex, to all friendly units in that hex, I should say. Okay, so both Howe and Dakin are now in the same cover on that beach. So they found a rock laying around, or a, I don't know, a bit of old beech wood or something, or anti-tank structure, or something to get themselves behind, and that just improves their cover. So rather than 6+ cover, they're now on 5+ cover, which does help, doesn't it? It sort of doubles the, still not great cover obviously, but it's 1 in 3 is better than 1 in 6, just in case they get fired upon. Okay, let's go over here then. So third impulse we're going to do here, we can do Sykes or we can do Ray. And I think I'm going to do Sykes first, just to see what he gets. So 1d6, remember, for a corporal, and he gets 5. So again, rolling well on the orders, which is great. So what he's going to do is try and get some fire on this LMG. It'd be nice to get this one pinned, and then we're sort of sorted. So he's going to order these guys here to fire their rifles. So Brigg, Jones and Lopez have all got rifles. Lopez has got a grenade launcher, which is a useful weapon. It takes 3 orders to fire that, but it only has a range of 1 to 2 hexes, so it can only fire here or here. And there are no German units there. You can't target these, by the way. They're just markers. They don't do anything else, not until you land on them. So he's going to order, because rifles have a range of 0 to 3, 1, 2, 3, they are in range of the LMG, or the LMG is in their range, I should say. So for 3 of those orders, Corporal Sykes is going to order Brigg, Jones and Lopez to fire their rifles. So they get 1 dice each, or 1 die each, for rifle fire. But because there are 3 of them in the same hex, firing at the same target at the same time, combined fire, remember, allows you to have an extra bonus die for each additional person firing. So because there are 3 of them, we get 2 extra dice. That gives 5 altogether, which is not bad for 3 orders. And that group rifle fire is aiming at the LMG in the bunker. Let's see what we get there. Okay, we've got a hit, or an accurate shot, I should say, and a pin, which is good. So again, the LMG is in a bunker and in cover. So again, it has, unfortunately, a 2+ save. And that rolls a 3, which is a successful save, but it is, of course, pinned. So we've done the most important task. The objective here really was to get those things pinned. At least that's going to help to some degree. Now, Sykes has still got 2 orders left, so he's going to order Brigg and Jones to advance. In fact, he's going to order Brigg and Lopez to advance, I think. So that puts Lopez in range then with his grenade launcher of this bunker if we need it next turn. And that's Corporal Sykes' impulse done. So let's do Staff Sergeant Ray. Staff Sergeant Ray is the most senior officer, gets 3d6 to establish orders. And okay, luck always balances out in the end, doesn't it? So I had fantastic rolls for the other 3 leaders. He's rolled 3 dice and the highest roll was 2. Now that's awful. What I really wanted to do is get Hall up into this hex here and use his scouting ability. I can't do that. I haven't got enough orders, so that'll have to wait till next turn. So I think what Staff Sergeant Ray will do is order, for 1 order, he'll order Jones to move up 1 hex to there. And then for the other order, he will order, he could order one of them to fire a rifle shot at this bunker, but 1d6 on its own is, it's, you know, he's already pinned. It's not, if he wasn't pinned, I'd probably do it. Chance of getting a 5 or 6 is reasonable, but only 6s count because he's already pinned, so there's just no point. I think what we'll do instead is just try and get these 3 to try to find cover. One of these, let's say we're ordering Jones to find cover. So he needs a 5 or 6. He gets a 6, so again, still rolling reasonably well generally. And he gets cover, and remember that applies to all 3 of them on the hex. So again, they, you know, dived to the ground and found a rocky outcrop to hide behind or something. Okay, so that brings to the end my final impulse, and that is the US operations phase done for this turn. So you can see, you know, moving is tricky, moving is slow, it's a bit of a grind. You've got 12 turns, so you've got to get a long way up there. And we haven't even started discovering enemy fire yet. Let's do the German operations phase for this turn. So we tend to do, we work through these charts in order. So first of all, we're looking for any Germans that are engaged with US troops. That means they're on the same hex as them. We haven't got any of those. It's maybe just these 3 guys here. None of them are engaged with US, so we ignore that. Then we're looking for German officers. We haven't got any German officers. German snipers, haven't got any of those. And then other Germans, but only those that are not pinned. So in fact, all of these categories are not pinned. So none of these could ever apply to that. But what I'm saying is you work through these tables one by one coming down. There's only 5 tables, but you're just looking for the particular class of people. So the first one is engaged, Germans who are engaged with the US and not themselves pinned, where there aren't any of those. There's no unpinned officers, there's no unpinned snipers, there's no unpinned other units, which is where these 3 would have acted, but they can't because they're pinned. And what they would have likely done if they weren't pinned is there's a 66% chance that those heavy machine guns and light machine guns would have fired. So probably 2 of 3 of them at least would have fired, and that would have caused a bit of chaos. We got them pinned, so hopefully they won't do that. So we come down to the final bit here that says German all pinned soldiers. So now we deal with them. We deal with them when you've got more than one, you go front to back, left to right, which you do in most of my games, and it's just to keep things to a simple order to remember. So let's go with this guy first. We simply roll a d6. And this chart has 4 categories. So if I roll a 1 or 2, he will remain pinned and take no action. Okay, keeps his head down. Not a bad result for us. If he rolls a 3 or 4, he will rally, so remove the pin, but then retreat to the hex immediately behind him. So he'll go back into these woods. Now that's not a bad result. He does rally, which means he's then going to act normally potentially next time, but at least he's retreated out of this bunker, which is quite a difficult hex to get to, as you've already seen. Quite difficult hex to remove people from. So retreating is not too bad, although we're not that close to the bunker. And if we were near the bunker, we got a chance of getting someone in there and taking it over and finding our own cover in there and taking that really strong position. And it's on a hill, of course, which is good. But we're not there yet. We've still got all these markers between us and them. So that's not so good, but it's okay. It's not bad. If he rolls a 5, he'll rally and remove the pin and not move anywhere, just rallies. That's not a great result for us because then he's still in the bunker and we're back to square one. If he gets a 6, which is by far the worst roll for us, he will rally and then open fire. So that's a bad result. And that's going to apply, that chart applies to all 3 of these because they're all HMG, they're all pinned. Yeah, so the chart applies to all 3. So let's do the HMG over here first, see what he gets. He gets a 3. So in fact, he does rally and then he will retreat. Okay, now you never take cover with you because obviously the cover was the bunker. You know. When a hex is vacated of all friendly soldiers, the cover goes away. So that was, that was German cover, if you like. When the last German vacates the hex, the cover is gone. And that includes when they're killed. So he rallies and retreats. The LMG gets a 6. Oh dear. So he does rally. Just rolling too many 6s, and I'm rolling for me and them, which is never good. Okay, he rolls a 6. So he rallies and then opens fire. Okay, now if we look at this bit of the chart we're in, there is a fire preferences test here. So remember, he only fires units, soldiers in line of sight. Line of sight runs down there and down there. Okay, so he can potentially shoot at these three and these three. They are in range because his range is 4 hexes. Okay, so looking at the preferences, the first test is, or the first tie break, if you like, says nearest hex. That's this one. Okay, it's 2 hexes away, that's 4 hexes away. So he will fire at this hex. Remember, he's firing at the hex, so potentially at everybody in there. LMGs fire with 5 dice. So let's give him 5 dice. Okay. And they fire in exactly the same way as the US. So looking for 5s and 6s. Remember, he's on a higher ground hex. So he will re-roll any 1s that he rolls. So let's do the attack. Okay. He's rolled 2 5s, 2 misses, and this one will be re-rolled. And unfortunately for me, he's rolled a 6. So he's ended up with what could be potentially a bit of a disastrous roll. He's got 1 accurate shot and 2 pins. And remember, we deal with the accurate shot first. Cover for my guys, they're in a clear hex, so that would have been a basic 6+ save. Fortunately for me, they did find cover, which brings their save down by 1 to 5+. So they got a 1 in 3 chance of saving this hit. There's only 1 accurate shot, so hopefully you'll see another 5 or 6, which I seem to be rolling well. Unfortunately not, that's a 3. So we fail to save, and therefore one of these guys has been hit and will be, as a consequence, injured. So I get to choose. Okay, so when the US are injured, it's player choice. I can pick anyone I like. Now I'm probably going to pick Brig or Jones because Lopez has a grenade launcher which can be useful. So let's put the injury on Jones. Okay, then there are 2 pins to allocate. Okay, so I take 2 pin markers and I have to put, because there is more, and if there's only 1 US guy here, I just pin that guy and the other counter would be discarded. But because there are 3, I have to allocate these 2 pins. What I can't do is put them both on one guy, obviously, because you can't pin somebody who's already pinned, and that would just be silly if I was allowed to do that. So I'm going to choose Jones, who is already injured, but he can also be pinned. That's fine. And Brig. Okay, so I'm going to pin Brig and I'm going to pin Jones. And that's the end of the LMG's activation. And then I'm going to activate finally this HMG at the top there, and he gets a 4. And thinking about it, what I should have done with Jack, I know his fine Lordo, after he'd done that Mortifier, he should actually have moved, I should have moved him away. That's what I intended to do when I did the setup. Because if I'd rolled a 6 for this guy, he would have fired at Jack, and that would have been absolutely disastrous because he's got no cover and basic 6+ cover, and he's my second most senior leader, so that would have been disastrous. Anyway, he's rolled a 4, which means he doesn't fire. In fact, it's the best roll we could have had. Remember, 3 or 4 means that this guy will rally, so remove the pin, and then retreat to the hex directly above his own, always the one directly above, up the same column. And it's clear in the rules that this is the only occasion when a German unit can leave the battlefield without actually being hit. So he will move to the hex above himself because it's off map. He's actually removed or eliminated from the game. So that's actually a really good result. So that pin was great. Okay, so if you can keep pinning, like if I could pin him again, he might retreat again. If I could pin him again, he might retreat again. It's a way of getting them off the board without actually having to eliminate them. But it certainly works well when you've got somebody on the top line of hexes already. The same applies if for some reason they couldn't retreat. I should have probably said this earlier. You can only ever have 3 soldiers in a hex of either side. Okay, so this hex here is full. It's got 3 soldiers in it. So if he tried to retreat into a hex that already had 3 soldiers, he wouldn't be able to do that, and again he would be eliminated from the game. Similarly, if he tried to retreat into an inland water hex, there are none on this map, but some maps do have them, then he would be eliminated from the game. Okay, but it's the only time. There are other occasions where the AI might want to try and move units backwards. On those occasions, if they can't move, they simply won't move. But this particular instruction, this retreat when pinned, that is, again, the rules are clear. They will, even says it on this page here, they will move off the map. So we got a bad result there, we got an excellent result there. And that's the end of the turn. So then we move the turn counter on to turn number 2, and this is where we need to have a quick look at these little red numbers. Okay, so this 8 tells us that we should now have, at this point, when we move the turn counter onto it, we should now have no more than 8 potential enemy markers left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8. As I said before, all missions start with 8, so you can never actually fail it on turn 2, of course. But you'll notice at the start of next turn, we can have no more than 7, so we have to resolve one of those potential enemy markers in the next turn. That's the end of that turn. I think what I'll do is leave it there because the video is already running to 50 minutes, and I'll play hopefully the next couple of turns in the next video. Cheers.